everyone, today we're going to be sewing up this really simple pencil case pattern. This is cut from measurements and I'll make sure that I have those written down for you, but I really just wanted to demonstrate this different style of zipper installation where you have the rounded corners and you don't need any tabs. The zipper sits at the side of the bag, kind of tucks into the side seam with this unique triangle shape there, and you don't need any tabs to get a neat zipper installation. So it's a really good technique to have as part of your bag making toolbox. So let's get going. For this project, you'll need your exterior fabric interfaced with a light to medium weight interfacing. You'll also need a piece of fusible fleece, and you'll need your lining fabric. I am using quilting cotton that has been interfaced with non-woven interfacing. I like to use P44F for my lining pieces. The measurements for the pouch that I'm making today are 9 inches across and 8 inches tall. If you're using a directional print, it will be upside down on one side. You can always add seam allowance and split your piece and then sew it together, but I prefer to make this with a solid exterior piece. So 9 inches by 8 inches for your exterior. Your fleece is 8 inches by 7 inches tall and fused to the center of your exterior panel. And your 2 lining pieces to start with are 9 inches across and 3 3/4 inch tall. We are going to trim these pieces down so that our lining will nest inside of our exterior. So grab your ruler and a rotary cutter, and we're just going to trim a triangle off the side. I like to start my taper 1/2 inch down from the upper edge and come in 3/8 inch from the bottom. And you're going to do that on both lining pieces at both sides. Once you've tapered your lining pieces, we're going to mark the centers of our exterior, lining, and zipper tape. Marking the center top of our lining pieces. You can use a pen or you can make a small snip just within the seam allowance. My snip only comes in about 1/16 inch. The top and the bottom of your exterior are the longer sides, but we are also going to mark your sides. You may find it helpful to mark which side is the top. And we're also going to place a mark that is 5/8 inch from the upper edge and the lower edge. Run a strip of 1/8 inch double-sided tape along the top and bottom edge of your exterior piece and along the top of both of your lining pieces. If you don't like to use double-sided tape, you can substitute clips or pins. Take your zipper and we're going to place it right sides down on your exterior, lining up the center mark on the zipper tape with the center mark on your exterior. Doesn't matter if you're working first on the front or the back right now. Take one of your lining pieces and place that right sides down on the back of your zipper to sandwich it in between the layers. And you're then going to sew along this upper edge all the way from one edge of your exterior to the other, backstitching well at either end with a seam allowance of 5/16 inch. If you're using size 3 zipper tape, you will sew with 1/4 inch. If you prefer to sew with 3/8 inch, you can do that. I just prefer 5/16 inch as I like the amount of space that it leaves on either side of my zipper teeth. So sewing straight along here from one end to the other and backstitching. I've switched over to my zipper foot and I'm just going to sew straight down this edge. I'm using a shorter stitch length and sewing at 5/16 inch. Working with the other edge of our exterior, we are going to remove that double-sided tape and attach the zipper along this side as well, lining up the center mark again, and also making sure that when we press that down, that the edges of our exterior are lining up. Take your second lining piece and you're just going to lay that right sides down on the back of the zipper tape to sandwich the other side of your zipper, lining up your centers, and the edges should also line up. And then we'll sew this side the same way at 5/16 of an inch or your chosen seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end, sewing through the exterior, the zipper tape, and the second lining panel. Keeping my zipper closed, I'm just checking that I have nice even spacing on either side of the teeth. And then I'm going to press my lining away from the zipper teeth. You can use an iron or a seam roller. And what I'm then going to do is understitch my zipper seam. I am not going to be top stitching on the outside of this particular pattern. So I'm going to sew from one end of my lining all the way to the other end of the lining using a longer stitch length at 1/8 of an inch from this fold, sewing through the lining, the zipper tape seam allowance, but not sewing through my exterior at all, just through the lining. And then what I'll do is flip my exterior around to the other side, and I will do the same for the second side of the lining, again, not sewing through my exterior. Back stitching at the beginning, and I will back stitch at the end. And the reason that we are understitching is because that will keep the lining of our pencil case away from the zipper, and it makes for a neater upper edge of your bag because the lining section will not bulge out at the fold. But for this particular style of zipper installation, it's easier if you don't have your exterior top stitched. So we won't be top stitching the outside. We have to pull the zipper ends up a little to get the rounded corners. So we don't want them to be sewn down to the exterior. If you're using zipper by the yard, now would be the time to put your zipper pull on. I'll put a link to my video demonstrating how to apply your pulls without using any aids so that you can practice that. Slide your pull to the middle. And then what we're going to do is sew our exterior section from the fold where we marked the center up to this line. You don't want to sew any further than where we've made that mark. So I'm going to tuck my zipper away from my exterior for the moment so that I don't catch it. Press that down and place some clips. And I'm going to sew at 3/8 of an inch from the folded edge to the mark. What I'm then going to do is come back down this edge, and I'm just going to come in ever so slightly as it comes towards the bottom, about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little further in than that, and that is going to help our finished pencil case have a more rectangular shape when it's done, because the upper edge will be bulky where the zipper is, and the lower edge will not be, and the bulk at the top will pull the sides in a little, which will give it a more trapezoidal shape or a vague trapezoidal shape, and this is just to balance that out. I find it's easiest for me if I sew from the bottom to the top, and I'm just going to pull my zipper tape back, and you want to make sure that you have your zipper pull on. If you are using a dress zipper, then make sure your zipper is towards the middle. Using your shorter stitch length, back stitch well. Keep the lining pulled back and lined up as much as you can, and that will help keep the upper edge even. Just going to put a couple of clips here so that the zipper doesn't roll. Sewing up to the line that we made earlier. Back stitching there. I like to put some nice reinforcing stitches in there. And then I'm going to flip around and go back down this edge, and now I'm going to come in ever so slightly to around the edge of where that fleece is. Just sewing on a slight diagonal. I'm going to repeat the same for the other side of the zipper, folding it at the lower edge where we've made the center mark, tucking the zipper back from the exterior for now. Clip the lining below the zipper to keep it in position so it doesn't roll. And sewing the other side. Back stitching when you get to the mark. And turn around and sew back towards the lower edge of that fleece. And now we'll sew our linings. When you're sewing the lining, you want to keep the zipper teeth pushed towards the exterior like so, with the even overhang still there on either side. We're going to leave an opening in the bottom of our lining to turn our pencil case through, so we're just going to make some marks. This doesn't have to be exact, but an opening of 3 to 4 inches is good. And I just like to draw a line to mark that opening. Because we've tapered our lining piece, we can use the same seam allowance as you use for the exterior. And I'm just going to start sewing at the lower edge of the lining pocket. I'm going to sew 3/8 of an inch up, perpendicular to the edge, and then I'm going to pivot 90 degrees, sew to the corner, pivot, and come up this edge, and I'm going to stop sewing where the lower edge of this seam allowance is. So you want to have your zipper even. You can place a clip here to help, and we're just going to be sewing here, turn up to this lower edge, and we're going to do the same thing on both sides of the lining. The reason that we are starting sewing perpendicular to the edge is that will help the lower edge of that pocket to tuck in when we are closing up the lining. Turn 90 degrees and sew down this edge. I like to back stitch a stitch or two in the corner. Then we're going to pivot and we're sewing up here. Check that it is as well lined up as you can get it. And we're sewing just up to the edge of that seam allowance where you can see the interfacing on your exterior piece. When you get there, you're going to stop and back stitch. And then you're going to do the same on the other side. So the exterior of this pencil case is sewn really in 4 stages. My marker's on the other side, so I'm just going to check where that is. Start here, smooth everything out. Sewing in 3/8 of an inch, back stitching, then pivot. Sew to 3/8 of an inch from the other edge, back stitch if you like, pivot again, and then sew up this side. Keeping the zipper pushed towards your exterior. And then back stitch. Grab your scissors and we're going to trim our threads, and we're also going to cut this corner here, just clipping within the seam allowance, and that will reduce bulk at that corner when we turn the bag out. Do not trim your zipper tape. Leave that long. You want it to have at least an inch of overhang. We need that excess for when we make the curved corner for our zipper ends. If you have pinking shears, you can also trim back the seam allowance here. I prefer to use pinking shears so that any fraying is less likely. If you just use your regular scissors to cut it back, then you may get fraying into your seam line. So how we're looking is, this is our exterior and this is our lining, and we have a gap of about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch here over the space where our zipper tape is. And now we're going to turn the bag out through the hole in the lining. You can, before you turn it out, if you like, make a memory crease, but because we have sewn the lining with that perpendicular stitch line, it's not really necessary. It will tuck in pretty well on its own. If your zipper is not already open, open that out. And then we are going to turn the pencil case through that opening in the lining. Poke out the bottom corners. Once you have your bottom corners nicely poked out, we can do the top corners. So I'm going to go to these edges, and what you will find is that when you turn out the top corners, it creates a V type shape as the zipper tape disappears into the side of the bag. So what we want to do is tuck in our lining to make sure that we're getting the right shape. I'm going to smooth it out. And you can just gently pull up on that zipper tape or poke it from the inside to get the rounded corner. It's why it is so important to keep the extra at the edge of your zipper, because we pull it up a little to get that nice rounded shape. You're going to do the same on the other side. You can see the V there on the inside as well. You can carefully pull it up from both ends. You don't want to pull it too far. If you do pull it too far, then you can pop your hand back inside and just pull the end of your zipper tape back through. When you're happy with how that looks, you can close up your lining. I like to poke my corners out just slightly so that I can get it to oppose really well where the opening is, and press that down. And then you can either sew it closed with your sewing machine, or you can hand sew that closed, just sewing from about 3/8 inch from the outside all the way across and back to the other side so that you fully close up that opening. To use a thread color that closely matches my lining, and I use as narrow of a seam allowance as I can manage while still catching both sides to reduce the size of that ridge in the bottom of your lining. If you really don't like that ridge, then using a ladder stitch is a great way to avoid it. Back stitch again at the other side of the opening. Pull your threads tight and snip or singe those. Then you can tuck that lining in. Poke the corners down into the corners of the exterior, and it should sit nicely inside because we have tapered our lining. So it should not be baggy at all. And we've also understitched the lining so it sits really neatly inside. You can press that from the outside if you like. Close it up, and there you have your finished zipper pouch. It's a really simple way to demonstrate how to do this curved corner style of zipper installation. It's great to have options that don't involve tabs. You don't have a dented corner, you have that unique round shape. It's not as common as the one with tabs, but it's really good to have different options to be able to show you so that you can find the ones that you like the best. and I'm hoping to be able to showcase lots of different styles of zipper installation for you in some upcoming tutorials. Hope that helps. Thanks, everyone.